delays.
This is the state of the video at the moment. There's over an hour worth of content there and I'm only roughly halfway done. I intend to release the full 2+ hour video, but for now I'm thinking I split it between early, mid to late and endgame, a part 1, 2 and 3 sort of thing. I'm compelled to have all of my videos released on the 19th of a month for no real reason. That's not feasible. A March release date for the full vid maybe isn't either, but almost certainly before the 19th of April, a year since I did my TAC video. The full vid will have a preamble about DLATMOL and map qualities and how I judge them, but for now, here's basically the raw segments of DLATMOL early game, or part 1, from the prologue to chapter 9. So the prologue starts with a self-insert, who's a dark mage, Natch, heading up to the dukedom of Untitled, where they meet Hector, Orion. The tactician is on a journey to better their tactical genius and step out of their father's shadow. Very quickly, Camille, TacTac's tactician, noticeably stuck to the strategies of Ulysses, their father, who was a big brain strategist as well. Anyway, shenanigans ensue, bandits raid, the castle mounts a counter-offensive. An immediate observation is how the hack doesn't really launch you into a new world with new faces or ideas. Hector is right there. And there's Titania. No fancy level 10 Yagans here, standard paladin. I'm not complaining. If you're going to copy a Yagan, copy Titania. The other thing was seeing Heck with 2 swords and immediately judging this hack as dumber than the last promise. As edgy as Kellic was, I never saw him bust out the dual wielding. I think the big bad snoo lady you meet later on calls him out as just wanting to look cool, and I've heard there is a lore reason he uses 2 swords. That doesn't make it less stupid. All that is nitpicking, the animation work is nice and the sound is weighty. Now initially I had a joke here about Shez and their dual wielding and another case of stolen ideas, because initially I wanted this video out before Hope's released. Now that's a joke, and I really don't want to discuss Hope's. The prologue is nothing to stand out. Francine is designed very well in that she's slow but strong, so she can still feed kills. Though for the prologue, that steel axe will kill the bandits and she can double the merc. I'm not certain why Shermie is a dunderhead, but I have seen her succumb to the Myrmidon curse despite being a mercenary. One of the recipients of buffs, guessing growths because her bases look the same. Good stuff all around. Chapter 1 immediately starts with something interesting. Did you notice it? Where's the boss? We also get Eli and Emma. Now, I didn't use Eli because I remain unconvinced the GBA archers will ever be good outside of TacTac, and Emma struggled for mediocrity last run. Something ridiculous like 11 strength at 21 and not even with a good enough speed stat or bulk to make up for it. Only thing she had going was 2 weapons and move. I've heard she's a coin flip unit and in fact actually has stats exactly like Eli would. Anyway, nothing too strenuous here. The mage up the top is very squishy and can be dispatched at your leisure. You do want to make your way up to the top village so you can get your first healer. I did end up benching Arthur on my last playthrough, but only after promotion and a dearth of other staff units came along that were just flat out better. Still, his service was appreciated. Francine can engage the cav reinforcements without risk of killing or taking any damage, funneling experience to your shitters. Simple, quick, easy, not bad. Chapter 2 gives us our first base screen. This is something you want to do rather early, especially if it comes with a convoy. If you're going to go out of your way to deny convoy access like the last promise, I think a warning would at least be nice. Orion gets his rapier, and Blair, fittingly, spawns on a fort. You've got a village to secure, a gate to defend, plenty of forts to heal up, and 9 turns to hold out or go up and kill the boss. You also get Heil, a fighter, an extra body, a red gem, well suited to a debut of doing enough. Now, don't discount those cav reinforcements who bust down the snag and breach through. Eli can't bait out the advanced nomad because archers are shit, and I only avoided a reset because I got very lucky. Use Blair to soak up hits as intended. Think ahead, and this chapter shouldn't offer much difficulty. Second run through I was waylaid by a turn somewhere and Francine didn't manage to off the boss and steal his book. A very standard early game defense chapter like Mercenary Fort Defense in Path of Radiance. Jumping straight into a sewer chapter, huh? Now, would you believe on my first playthrough this is where I saw Ronnie get a strength level up and thought, oh sweet, a thief that isn't garbage. I wouldn't say Ronnie is a garbage unit, but never have I had a more noodle-armed unit. Listen here, you rat-faced, cheese-smelling, onion-eating prick, fool me once, etc. In this chapter, plenty of enemies are using poison weapons, but we do have a restore staff and antitoxins. Well, obviously this map and the hack as a whole maybe wants to teach us to use our resources as we need them. This is a good thing, except Restore specifically is a bad example to me. Suffice to say, I found Restore in scarce supply on my last playthrough. We also see the 2 different types of armor knights, bow sword and lance axe, with generals promoting to have all weapons, blessed be. The javelin knights at the start can't be baited, which is aggravating, especially because the only 1 to 2 range we have right now, and for most of the game, is the tactician. Now, I would not recommend deliberately baiting out the boss, as he is an active pain in the ass. Again, I got a super lucky dodge and reminder to use the resources given. A hit and the damage over time would have killed Eli. There's a bit of nothing time after you've cleared the map and are just waiting to loot the chests and escort Orion to the arrive point. In my opinion, this is a slightly poorly paced chapter, but it's a minor complaint. Early game map simplicity will make something small like that stick out though. Just quickly, I don't like telling other people how to play their Fire Emblems. Yeah, I know, but here, very briefly, I want to give one piece of advice for DLATMOL early game. Take it seriously. Just because Francine is invincible doesn't mean anyone else is. And yes, just because it's easy doesn't mean it isn't dangerous. On to chapter 4 and we meet 2 new characters, Aislinn and Yet. Now there have been some odd names in Effie and ROM hacks for sure, but Yet to me is a standout strange one. It's like calling a character as or if. Anyway, the map looks pretty standard. Don't get caught out like a goober by that sword reaver or the boss's poleaxe. Francine isn't 100% the answer to this particular problem. We also meet Horton, who may or may not be looking to hear a who at the end of turn 1. Don't worry, that village is safe. Horton is capable of defending it, mostly. And bam, look, a 4th recruit, Fianna. Orion says it best in his all-knowing of Fire Emblem strategy way. In terms of the map itself, it's another slow one. All of these forests at the start make traversal a pain, and guess what, that flyer comes in handy, but not in the way you might think. What do you think happens when a Sword Reaver attacks a Myrmidon? The triangle reverses, and the Axe Magnet Curse triples. However, a lance against a Sword Reaver, you've got a winning formula. I don't think you actually have to talk to Yet to recruit her, but like Sephiroth, I've got a compulsion to do everything on this chapter. I feel like this chapter was deliberately designed to be slow, rather than just having early game sluggishness. Have fun with the end of map reinforcements because you definitely need to kill the boss before par time to avoid them. Chapter 5 starts with something very unfamiliar to me, snow. The gimmick of this chapter is not quite intermittent weather, but intermittent fog of war. The latter is, as far as I'm aware, unique and a simple and effective twist. This map was very up and down for me. On one hand you have the Tactician with about a 60% hit rate. On the other you have Fianna and Emma getting some decent levels and overall having a pretty decent handle on the map. Now, the lack of 2 range against the enemies on terrain your foot sloggers can't reach is a bit of a pain, but it's nothing you can't handle. By no means would I call this a difficult chapter, and it actually can have a decent flow despite the stop-start of Fog of War. If I were a betting man, and despite Fire Emblem just being dice rolls I sure am not, my guess is that the intermittent fog is actually to stop Ronnie and his torch bullshit. About halfway through the chapter we meet Dimsdale Dimmadome. Dale Murderhawk, and he's proper cross about some guy trampling his garden. Then he can be recruited. He does come with a hand axe. Now DLATMOL has a tendency to remove reliable 1-2 range, and guess what? That hand axe is not reliable. Even so, his kit is pretty nice, bringing some wah, a steel, and if you get to him in a timely fashion, a killer axe barely out of your way. Solid chapter, possibly the exiting point of early game, for the better. We start setting up some story stuff in chapter 6. We first meet Maxibon, get introduced to a monster, and notice that half the chapter isn't bloody visible. Maxi doesn't seem like he has the stats to be troublesome, and neither do any of his forces. He has a good formation, but it's pretty easily breached. He does the pretty standard Effie villain thing of getting beat and then warping away, but given everything I know about Dark Dude and the Light Lady, I'll let it slide. Tac-Tac did it too, a bit more egregiously I reckon. We open up the other half of the map, or more like 2/3, and it's a good thing XCOM taught me how to stack up and door breach, because that's the best bet. We get some priest reinforcements, see some chests to escort Ronnie to, and begin our assault into the fort proper, which goes pretty swimmingly. The actual mage boss is even more of a pushover than Max, and the Armonite and mage formation pretty much crumples before you. Along with some well-spaced chests that you're perfectly supplied for, all in all, this is a good chapter. One more thing, this chapter has a guiding requirement. The stationary monks in the bottom right and top right must survive for you to get to 6x. This isn't something you need to worry about, just clear in a timely fashion. Chapter 6 is, annoyingly, another fog chapter. If I were to ever make a ROM hack, I simply wouldn't bother including a fog chapter because there's nothing well designed about it. I will continue to complain about Fog of War because it will forever be a failure on the part of IS. It is inexcusable for an enemy unit to come out of fog with no prior line of sight and just swing at your dudes. On the chapter itself, in Fire Emblem I find it's typically not actually a bad idea to split the party. You need all that lovely experience after all. This carries similar risks to moving as one big blob, assuming enemies on the flank you don't take pursue, you're asking to be pincered. Immediately, a plan of action came to mind. Ronnie goes one way and a torch staff goes the other. Doing so will mitigate Fog of War, but I still despise it. Apart from the fog, this chapter is pretty tame. Yes, the constant eclipse spam is irritating, but the only time I got hit was on the 145% against Aislinn, who was nowhere near the front line. Typical hit rates for eclipse are no higher than 25% and are often single digit, so no real worries here. The other annoying thing here is diminishing vision with torches. At one point I wanted to check the weapon of an axe dude, but couldn't because he was one tile out of fog. He happened to have a sword reaver and chunked Emma who had a sword, because I was in range of an axe dude. Said axe dude also had no prior line of sight to my units and shouldn't have been able to do that, but we all know I'm not going to stop crapping on about it. Hit the 4 special tiles and the centre opens up. This also isn't too bad, the enemies are far out of range of the little rooms. What is bad is that fucking Nomad coming 9 tiles out of fog and shooting someone. What's your recourse there? There's no reason to go up to the top or torch it up, it's just a big fuck you. Closing in on the main objective, in the centre some of the Myrmidons do have sword readers, but with torch vision you can check and adjust accordingly. All the shamans in the very centre have loot to grab and depending on if they've burnt through their eclipse uses are more or less free kills. The monsters can be a problem. Francine with a steel can kill one and you can easily tag team to kill the other. Chandra herself is actually a slight problem. Nosferatu is dangerous. I didn't end up having a problem, but you do have to engage carefully. You also have to have Orion fight her if you want to recruit her. Good to see the old meme of Hector being a wife beater made it into Dak Jack and laugh at his sack. As a quick note on Chandra, I still believe redundancy is bad for a unit. However, everybody likes dark mages and Chandra is a good support for Orion, so she's got an advantage or two. Points deducted for Fog of War, but Fog is IS's fault, not the ROM hackers. You can't do your job right if you've not got working tools. Chapter 7 is a bit of a nothing chapter, just a perfectly adequate map, nothing stand out. Opening options are simple and effective, the path forward is straight and the only real surprise might be getting caught off guard by a longbow. Our objective, beyond seas, is to rescue Ren and Ashley, a lance, bow, armour and Pegasus Knight respectively. Now, Ashley has a reputation as being one of the best units in the game, and sure, I used her on my last playthrough, but I don't recall her being so obviously the best, and honestly Fianna seems very comparable, even if Fianna has almost definitely been on the roids. This leads to a conundrum. With me already running low on deployment slots, can I justify using 2 Pegasus Knights? Yes, by dumping Arthur. I also hear he's good, but I've never seen it. Just by virtue of all the tiles and chokes you have to cross, this is a bit of a long chapter, but I wouldn't call it slow paced. Early game is well and truly gone, and multiple options are now available to you, so gameplay can be a bit more open. I was originally going to talk about some story stuff here, but if you want to see the story stuff, play the game yourself. Suffice to say, there's a 10-minute intro that sort of comes out of left field. I do want to talk about one specific character, but we'll need full game context for that. However, gameplay. TacTac made archers good by giving them good stats and roughly doubling experience gain. Dank Damo and Bright Lezo makes them good by making them the answer to thorny problems. With both having bow armors, Ren might be a good shout to add to your team. I wouldn't, and didn't, and now I'm thinking the next step in ROM hacking is elevating armor knights. Even giving them 5 move would be a decent start. I digress, let's move on. With a mercifully short intro compared to the last one, we march to Volta in Chapter 8, the doorstep to Enteire's capital proper. The planned convergence of the 3 armies isn't happening, and Good King Orion's cousin Raymond, is to be executed because Dracul is a dick. Luckily, some guy is there to engage an enemy at one range with a bow and flee. I happen to like Bocab, so I ended up adding Luca to my team last playthrough, and he very quickly capped strength and became a standout unit. When it came to the final boss, he couldn't do anything, but that's getting very ahead of ourselves. As for Raymond, typically he filled a slot. With Emma being a Myrmidon on a horse, Raymond stood out as an actual cav with well-rounded stats. Sort of a reverse Negu Gerwolf tac-tac duo. With Emma turning out incredibly well, I doubt there'll be a place for Raymond and his special eyes. This chapter has a unique objective. Any of your units are to claim the 2 points outside of the city so that the city, and I quote, opens the gate to defend themselves. Barely makes a lick of sense to me, but I guess the city is worried about siege operations and thinks they can fight better outside of the city. Or something like that. We'll ignore it and move on, nothing's perfect. There's also a house at the top of the map, best nabbed by Francine and her 9 move, and it gives you James. Axe dudes in this hack are pretty great. One's a gardener and this one's a fisherman. James isn't the final word in Axe Infantry, you've still got some deciding to do. Fun times are ahead as you push through the chapter, hand axes, poison axes, and most fun of all, cav effective weaponry. Do not be stupid and try to go cav vs cav. As you approach the fort on the right, mages will spring out of the fort, but not to worry, you're not exactly facing mixed attackers because the soldiers standing guard don't move. After you secure both tiles, the enemies will combine the Clowncast strat with the Port Warren strat, neither executed to their fullest capacity, though you will get a nice surprise when the Armor Knights standing guard decide to move, or if you forget about that ballista and park a flyer within range. This was a fun one, plenty of chokes to fight through and seize, and I felt I had enough options to tackle anything that came my way. The maps have been getting better and better at a steady pace, and I'm all for it. Dracul folds before some chip damage and 3 times effective armor slaying, goes on about how there is no victory against Demos and carks it. Jasmine is next and we're in for a fight. Chapter 9 has the first little everyone says words of encouragement before the climactic battle, wherein we get the best line in the game. You go, James May, you follow your dreams. Despite being a big battle and our cast having swelled, we're still restricted to 12 deployment slots. And with chests to loot, Ronnie becomes mandatory to me, so I feel even further limited. We get reintroduced to the tile switches from 6X as the means of progressing through the map, which looks like a doozy as a whole. With winding long corridors defended by siege weapons, mixed range enemies, and slightly unpredictable openings as you hit the switches, topping off with a boss fight against a legendary 1-2 range weapon, yeah, this is the end of part 1 alright. With my choice to dump YuriThra, splitting the party with one healer means everyone has to be loaded up with vulneraries. My tactics for this map are sending the strongest units with the healer and the more well-rounded and numerous without. Oh, and the flyer isn't going anywhere near the ballista. Now, you could argue that many of the enemy being stationary is a pace killer, but in this case I'd spin it as being able to move at your pace, which if you listen to Orion, should be a quick one. Of course, you have to balance haste with caution, as there's no way to know that the enemies are stationary until you find out yourself, or listen to me. As the map closes, a minor utilisation of clown car strats has you facing a half dozen mixed range, mixed attackers, or rather defenders. Those dark mages are tricky, Luna and Nosferatu are nasty surprises. Blitz the bastards. Then prepare to square up against the biggest fop ever to grace ROM hacks. For his stats not being all that impressive, Jasmine sure does put up a bit of a fight. Even cav-effective weapons are only reliable on the damage front, not the hit rate front. Still, with a bit of luck, a few of your units should be able to survive a hit. Despite Durga bearing down on you, you should have plenty of time to beat Jasmine and seize the throne.